It was Christmas, the time for family. But my daughter-in-law, Chloe, delivered a chilling message. Don't come. You're not family anymore. After 5 years of quietly paying their mortgage and endless support, her words were a knife. I just smiled. Little did she know. That call freed me, and the financial lifeline she unknowingly relied on was about to disappear. What would you do? Follow my story and comment the city you're watching from. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. Surprisingly, Eleanor feels a profound sense of relief, freed from the constant pressure of seeking Chloe's approval. The late afternoon sun, a weak winter offering, painted warm stripes across Eleanor's cozy living room as she sat on the old floral sofa. At 64, her hands, still nimble and sure, moved with practiced grace, folding a soft, hand-knitted baby blanket into a neat square. The yarn was a delicate cream, a color Lily, her 3-year-old granddaughter, adored. Eleanor pictured Lily, her bright eyes and infectious giggle, and a sweet ache of anticipation bloomed in her chest. Christmas was just around the corner, and she was already looking forward to their traditional sleepover, a night filled with cookies, fairy lights, and whispered stories. These blankets were part of her preparations, a small token of love for her cherished granddaughter. Her reverie was broken by the sharp trill of her phone. She glanced at the screen, a flicker of surprise passing over her face. Chloe. Her daughter-in-law. A direct call from Chloe was rare. Usually it was Daniel, her son, who handled family communications. A hopeful thought sparked within Eleanor. Perhaps Chloe was calling to finalize the Christmas plans, to discuss Lily's sleepover, or perhaps even to invite her for Christmas Eve dinner. Eleanor picked up, a pleasant lilt in her voice. Hello, Chloe, dear. What a nice surprise. Chloe's voice, however, was not pleasant. It cut through the warmth of Eleanor's living room like an icy shard. Eleanor, she began, the name a blunt instrument in her mouth. Don't come for Christmas. The words hung in the air, heavy and bewildering. Eleanor's smile faltered. What are you saying, dear? She asked, her voice softer now, laced with confusion. You're not family anymore. The bluntness of it stole Eleanor's breath. She struggled to process the cruelty, the abruptness of the declaration. Her mind raced, searching for an explanation. Any explanation. I don't understand, Eleanor stammered, gripping the phone tighter. What do you mean, not family anymore? Chloe's tone sharpened, devoid of any empathy. It's quite simple, Eleanor. We don't want you here. Daniel and I discussed it, and we've decided you're not welcome anymore. The inclusion of Daniel's name twisted the knife deeper. Had her own son truly agreed to this? Chloe continued, her voice gaining a self-righteous edge. Honestly, Eleanor, you just have such negative energy. It's draining for us. Negative energy? Eleanor's mind reeled. 5 years. 5 years of unwavering support, of pouring her heart and limited resources into their lives. She remembered countless hours of babysitting Lily and her older brother, Sam, after school, ferrying them to doctor appointments, countless errands. She'd been their safety net, their reliable constant. When their car broke down, she'd loaned them her savings. When their utility bills piled up, she'd quietly paid them. Was that negative energy? Her chest tightened with a sense of profound injustice. Daniel. Is Daniel truly aware of this? Eleanor managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper, hoping against hope that Chloe was acting alone, perhaps in a fit of pique. Of course he is, Chloe scoffed, the sound dripping with derision. He just doesn't want to hurt your feelings. But we both feel the same way. The implication that Daniel was a coward, unwilling to deliver the blow himself, stung Eleanor more than Chloe's direct words. It painted a picture of a son who had agreed to cast her aside, then hidden behind his wife. We feel like we're always walking on eggshells around you, Chloe added, a dramatic sigh punctuating her sentence. Eleanor blinked. Walking on eggshells? Her? Eleanor, the non-confrontational, quiet woman who had spent her life trying to keep the peace, who actively avoided conflict. The irony was so bitter, it almost made her laugh. She was the one who consistently stifled her own opinions, bit her tongue, and went out of her way to accommodate Chloe's often unreasonable demands, all for the sake of her son and grandchildren. Her thoughts drifted to specific instances. Just last autumn, she had paid $300 for Lily's entire school shopping list, simply because Chloe had forgotten and claimed the budget was tight. And Sam, her sweet, boisterous grandson, she remembered the sheer terror when he broke his arm on the playground last year, and Eleanor, without a moment's hesitation, had dropped everything, rushed him to the ER, and stayed by his side, comforting him until Daniel and Chloe arrived hours later. These were not the actions of someone with negative energy. These were acts of selfless love. A strange calm settled over Eleanor. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Chloe expected tears. She expected an argument. Pleas, perhaps even hysterics. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I see," she said, her voice even, almost detached. "Well, I hope you have a lovely Christmas, Chloe." There was a pause on the other end, a beat of unexpected silence that spoke volumes. Chloe was clearly thrown off by Eleanor's composure. "Right," Chloe said finally, the single word clipped, devoid of the triumph she had probably anticipated. "Goodbye, Eleanor." And then the line went dead. Eleanor slowly lowered the phone, her hand still clutching the soft baby blanket. She looked at the delicate stitches, remembering the similar blanket she had knitted for Daniel when he was a baby, soft blue, adorned with tiny white sheep. The bitter irony washed over her like a cold wave. The very child she had once swaddled, cared for, and loved unconditionally was now, apparently, complicit in casting her out. Her son. Her only son. She rose, moving stiffly towards the kitchen. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the sudden void left by Chloe's harsh words. Eleanor put the kettle on for a cup of tea, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and pain. As the water began to boil, her gaze drifted out the window, past her modest garden, and to the faint outline of the large, elegant colonial house 2 streets away, the one Chloe and Daniel called home. It was a beautiful property, sprawling and grand, far beyond what Daniel's modest salary could afford. And there, in the quiet contemplation of her kitchen, the secret truth, heavy and long held, rose to the surface. For 5 years, ever since Chloe and Daniel bought that house, Eleanor had been making their $850 monthly mortgage payments, every single month. It had been Daniel's desperate plea. "Mom, please don't tell Chloe," he had begged, his voice laced with shame. "She'd never let me live it down. She thinks I can handle it." So Eleanor, ever the loving mother, had silently taken on the burden, sacrificing her own comfort, delaying her own retirement plans, all to keep their illusion of prosperity alive and, she hoped, to ensure her grandchildren had a stable home. A different kind of realization dawned then, sharper than the initial sting of rejection. Chloe had never truly liked her. It wasn't negative energy that bothered Chloe. It was Eleanor's very presence, a subtle reminder of their struggles, perhaps even a perceived threat to Chloe's control over Daniel. Eleanor recalled years of subtle digs, backhanded compliments about her quaint house or her simple life, thinly veiled criticisms of her parenting choices that dated back to Daniel's childhood. She had always dismissed them, made excuses, tried harder to please. Yet, amidst the pain and betrayal, a surprising sensation began to bloom in Eleanor's chest, a profound, almost dizzying sense of relief. The constant pressure of seeking Chloe's approval, of walking on her eggshells, of being perpetually on call for their needs, lifted like a heavy cloak. The rejection, brutal as it was, had unwittingly set her free. The mortgage payments? They would stop now. A new path, unburdened and unchained, stretched out before her. Chloe attempts a guilt trip, mentioning Lily asking about cookies, but Eleanor stands firm. "I think it's best if the children learn not to depend on me." The phone vibrated again, moments after Chloe's brutal dismissal. This time, the caller ID showed Daniel's name. Eleanor hesitated. a pang of something akin to pity stirring within her, quickly followed by a steely resolve. She answered, her voice calm, devoid of the tremor she felt deep inside. "Mom? Oh, thank God. Are you okay?" Daniel's voice was a mix of concern and a hurried apology. "I am so sorry about Chloe. You know how she gets with Christmas stress." She didn't mean it. Not really. "Please, Mom. Please still come for Christmas morning. The kids are expecting you." Eleanor listened, picturing Daniel, his brow furrowed, trying to mend a rift he himself had helped create. But the words Christmas stress felt like a flimsy veil over a much uglier truth. The idea of returning to normal, which in their household meant Eleanor tiptoeing around Chloe's moods, enduring her subtle slights, and watching her son shrink in his own home, now felt utterly repulsive. The relief she had experienced earlier solidified into conviction. "Daniel," Eleanor said, her voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "I won't be coming for Christmas." A choked sound came from the other end. "But Mom, Lily, she's been talking about your cookies all week. She'll be so disappointed." His voice cracked, an emotional plea designed to chip away at her resolve. Eleanor felt a familiar tug, a maternal instinct to shield her grandchildren from any sorrow, but she pushed it down. This was not about Lily's temporary disappointment. It was about a deeper, more fundamental boundary. "Tell Lily I love her very much," Eleanor instructed, her voice softening slightly at the mention of her granddaughter's name, "and explain that sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions. It's not about her, it's just the way things are now." She didn't elaborate, didn't offer a scapegoat or a detailed explanation. The truth, she knew, was too complex for a 3-year-old, and frankly, Daniel himself wasn't ready to hear it. There was a long silence on Daniel's end, a heavy quiet filled with unspoken recrimination and regret. "Mom, please think about this," he finally pleaded. But his voice lacked conviction. He knew, Eleanor realized, that this was different. "I've thought about it, Daniel," she replied gently, but with an unwavering tone. "And my decision is final. You and Chloe enjoy your Christmas." She ended the call, leaving Daniel to grapple with the aftermath of his wife's cruelty and his own complicity. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a strange, invigorating sense of purpose. The usual morning ritual of checking her phone for any updates or demands from Daniel or Chloe was notably absent. The familiar anxiety that had clung to her for years, a low thrum of worry about their well-being and her role in it, had vanished, replaced by a quiet determination. This day, she decided, would be hers. Her first action, even before her morning tea, was swift and decisive. She called her bank. "I'd like to cancel an automatic payment," she informed the polite customer service representative. "The one for the Maple Street property, effective immediately." The process was seamless. A few clicks, a verification, and it was done. The $850 mortgage payment, a monthly drain on her pension and savings, was no longer her responsibility. A deep sigh escaped her, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 5 long years. Next, she dressed purposefully and drove to the bustling mall. In her shopping bag were the carefully chosen Christmas gifts: a sparkling fairy doll for Lily, a complex Lego set for Sam, and for Chloe, a cashmere scarf Eleanor had painstakingly saved for, hoping it would, for once, elicit a genuine smile. One by one, she returned them. The process was surprisingly liberating. The fairy doll went back to its shelf, the Lego box disappeared, and the soft cashmere was whisked away. The sales assistant handed her a receipt and $327 in cash. It wasn't about the money, not entirely, but the act of reclaiming these tokens of unappreciated affection felt incredibly empowering. As she was leaving the mall, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Daniel. "Chloe feels bad," it read. "She wants to talk." Eleanor looked at the words, a faint, almost pitying smile touching her lips. Feels bad. Not is sorry. Not realized her mistake. But feels bad. She simply deleted the message. No response necessary. The time for talking had passed. Back home, Eleanor tackled the next item on her mental list. she had secretly arranged for a lavish Christmas dinner to be catered, a traditional spread with all the fixings, which she intended to deliver to their house on Christmas Eve. A gesture of overflowing generosity she had hoped would somehow bridge the unspoken chasm between them. It had cost her a hefty $2,000. She called the catering company. There was a cancellation fee, naturally, but after a polite but firm negotiation, she managed to recoup $1,600. The money, now back in her account, felt like a tangible symbol of her rediscovered freedom. By evening, Eleanor was physically exhausted but oddly satisfied. She had been productive for herself, for her own well-being, in a way she hadn't been in years. The house felt lighter, the air cleaner. She settled down with a cup of chamomile tea, a quiet calm enveloping her. Her tranquility was briefly interrupted by another call. Chloe again. This time, her voice was noticeably smaller, less certain. A stark contrast to the venomous tone of the previous day. Eleanor, I wanted to apologize, Chloe began, clearly trying to soften her stance, attempting to walk back her words. Eleanor remained calm, her voice steady and unwavering. Chloe, she said. I think you said exactly what you meant to say yesterday. Chloe spluttered. No, that's not. I was just so stressed with all the Christmas planning, and the kids, and everything. The excuses tumbled out, desperate and unconvincing. I understand that Christmas can be a demanding time, Eleanor acknowledged, her tone polite, almost academic. But your words were very clear. You're not family anymore. We don't want you here. There wasn't much room for misinterpretation, Chloe. A new tactic emerged from Chloe. But Lily, she's already asking about your cookies. She'll be so heartbroken. The guilt trip, as predicted, had arrived. Eleanor met it head-on, her voice losing none of its firm resolve. I think it's best if the children learn not to depend on me for things like that anymore. It wouldn't be fair to them, or to me, to create expectations that cannot be met. The finality in her voice was absolute. The line had been drawn. Eleanor suggests Daniel call the bank directly. Chloe remains terrified, emphasizing the house means everything to them. You're being so cold, so distant, Chloe accused, her voice edged with frustration, a stark contrast to her earlier attempts at a contrite tone. Eleanor listened, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. Chloe was right. It wasn't like the old Eleanor, the one who would bend over backward, smooth things over, and absorb every slight with a silent sigh. But that Eleanor was gone. This new Eleanor, forged in the fires of an abrupt and unjust dismissal, was indeed different. Perhaps you're right, Chloe, Eleanor conceded, her voice still measured and calm. Perhaps I've changed. Chloe, seemingly taken aback by Eleanor's agreement, quickly shifted tactics. Well, if you've changed, then we should meet. You, me, and Daniel, we can talk this through, like adults. Figure things out. The proposition, meant to sound reasonable, struck Eleanor as manipulative, a desperate attempt to reassert control and pull her back into the familiar dynamic. There's nothing to talk through, Chloe, Eleanor stated, her resolve unwavering. Yesterday, you made it very clear that I'm not part of this family. I'm simply accepting your decision. The quiet power in her voice left no room for argument. It was a simple, undeniable truth, echoed back to Chloe with unwavering clarity. A flicker of panic, unmasked and raw, entered Chloe's voice. But I didn't mean that, she stammered. Her earlier bravado completely dissipated. I don't know what I meant. Then perhaps, Eleanor suggested, her voice devoid of malice but filled with a quiet authority. You should take some time to figure out what you do mean. When you've done that, perhaps you'll have more clarity. And with that, Eleanor ended the call, leaving Chloe suspended in her own confusion. After hanging up, a profound sense of satisfaction washed over Eleanor. It wasn't a malicious triumph, but rather a deep contentment born of self-preservation. For years, she had felt like a puppet master, pulling strings to keep their lives afloat, silently shouldering their burdens, managing their problems. Now, the strings were cut. The burden was gone. She felt lighter, more powerful than she had in decades. She anticipated Daniel's inevitable call, a more direct plea, perhaps even an angry accusation. But she was ready. Her resolve was solid. 4 days passed in an unusual, almost serene quiet. The usual daily texts from Daniel, detailing some minor crisis, the occasional request for a favor, all ceased. Eleanor enjoyed the peace, spending her time tending to her garden, reading, and finding joy in simple pleasures. Then, on the first day of December, as Eleanor was meticulously repotting a delicate orchid, carefully teasing its roots into fresh bark, her phone began to explode. It vibrated with a frantic insistence, call after call, a rapid-fire succession of rings that shattered the morning's tranquility. It was Chloe. Her voice, when Eleanor finally answered, was a choked sob, bordering on hyperventilation. "Eleanor! Oh my God! Eleanor, you have to help us!" "Chloe, what is it?" "Calm down. I can barely understand you." Eleanor's voice was even, betraying no hint of the knowing anticipation that stirred within her. The bank called, they said. They said we missed a mortgage payment." Chloe wailed, her words punctuated by gasps for air. "They said we're late. But that's impossible. Daniel set up automatic payments years ago. We've never missed one. There must be some mistake. A computer glitch or something." Chloe's denial was absolute, utter. It was clear she genuinely believed in the infallibility of their financial arrangements, unaware of the silent, steady hand that had guided them for so long. Eleanor, already knowing the truth, kept her voice calm and neutral. "Have you checked with Daniel about this?" "He's at work, and he's just as confused as I am," Chloe cried, her panic palpable through the phone. "He said he'd call them at his lunch break, but they said if the payment isn't made by Friday, they'll start foreclosure proceedings." "Foreclosure? Eleanor? Can you believe it?" The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. Chloe's voice cracked, raw with fear. "Our house, Eleanor. The house where Lily was brought home, where Sam took his first steps. We can't lose it. It means everything to us." Eleanor listened, observing the genuine terror in Chloe's voice. It was clear that, in Chloe's mind, this was their house, their mortgage, their problem. She truly believed they owned it, that they were responsible for it. The truth, so carefully hidden by Daniel, had now slammed into her with brutal force. "Well, then Daniel certainly needs to call the bank directly," Eleanor suggested, her tone still calm, offering the most obvious, logical course of action without betraying her secret. "But what if it's not a mistake?" Chloe whimpered, her panic overriding any rational thought. "What if it's real? The house, Eleanor, it means everything to us." Her voice faded into another choked sob, the carefully constructed facade of her life crumbling around her. Eleanor knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the real panic had only just begun. Daniel, now crying softly, asks what she wants him to do. Eleanor demands he figure out how to pay his own mortgage, explain consequences to Chloe, and decide if he'll be a husband who sacrifices his mother or a son who stands up for her. 2 hours later, as the midday sun began to climb higher, Daniel's name flashed across Eleanor's phone screen. This time, his voice was tight, a frantic edge replacing the earlier confusion. He had clearly spoken to the bank. "Mom," he started, his breath ragged. "The bank said the automatic payment for the mortgage was canceled. They said it was canceled by the account holder." "But I never canceled it, Mom. I swear." His panic was raw, palpable. He was genuinely bewildered, clinging to the idea that this was some inexplicable error. Eleanor feigned a moment of puzzled silence, allowing the silence to stretch, for Daniel to navigate the treacherous waters of realization on his own. "Oh? That's peculiar, isn't it?" she mused, her voice calm, almost detached. "Did they say which account it was?" Another pause, heavier this time, pregnant with a dawning, terrible understanding. Yes, Daniel whispered, the word barely audible. They said. They said the account number was yours. Mom, why would your account be making our mortgage payments? The question hung in the air, a dam finally cracking, letting the truth trickle out. Eleanor met his question with a simple, yet profoundly weighty statement. Daniel, I think you know why. The next few moments were filled with the sound of Daniel's frantic calculations, the quiet click of his mind as he pieced together 5 years of unspoken generosity. 5 years? He choked out, his voice thick with disbelief and dawning horror. You've been paying our mortgage for 5 years? That's over $50,000. The sheer magnitude of her sacrifice seemed to hit him like a physical blow. Why, Mom? Why didn't you ever tell me it was still happening? He asked, his voice tinged with a blend of accusation and devastation. Eleanor sighed, a long, weary sound. Because you needed to believe you could handle it yourself, Daniel. And because Chloe needed to believe you could handle it yourself, she knew the deeper truth. He needed the illusion to survive Chloe's expectations. And she had enabled it. Out of a misguided sense of maternal love and protection. Another silence, longer and more fraught than the others. Chloe, Daniel finally breathed, the realization sinking in. She has no idea, does she? She'll kill me. His fear of Chloe's reaction was almost more pronounced than his shock over Eleanor's financial aid. He was not just devastated by his mother's sacrifice. He was terrified of his wife's wrath. You'll figure it out, Eleanor told him, her voice unwavering, when he anxiously asked what he would tell Chloe. She was not going to solve this for him. Not anymore. This was a reckoning he had to face. Mom, please, Daniel pleaded, his voice cracking. You have to make the payment. Just this once, by Friday. Please, save our home. Think of the children. Mom, please, for Lily and Sam. Don't let them lose their home. He played the children card. The ultimate emotional weapon. But Eleanor, for the first time in years, was immune to it. Daniel, she said, her voice firm, resolute. I'm not making that payment. What? His voice rose, incredulous. What do you mean? You're not making the payment. I mean exactly that. I'm not making the payment. I'm done. Eleanor repeated, each word a stone laid squarely on the path of her new independence. You're punishing us, Daniel accused, anger creeping into his tone, replacing the panic. You're punishing us for Chloe's mistakes. I'm not punishing anyone, Daniel. Eleanor corrected him, her voice holding an icy clarity. I'm not mad at Chloe. I'm done with Chloe. There's a difference, she paused, letting the distinction sink in. I'm done being taken for granted. Done being treated as a personal ATM and an unpaid nanny. Done being erased from the family the moment I cease to be convenient, she continued, the words flowing with a quiet power, a meticulous recounting of his forgotten debts. For years, I picked up your children from school, often multiple times a week. I rushed Sam to the ER when he broke his arm, stayed by his side for hours. I bought Lily her school clothes. I drove miles to run your errands when your car was in the shop, and I paid for the repairs. And yes, Daniel, I paid your mortgage, quietly, faithfully, month after month, for 5 years, because you begged me to. I did all of that, not because I expected anything in return, but because I loved you, and I loved my grandchildren. I wanted to help. Her voice hardened. And what was my reward? For Chloe to tell me, with your silent agreement, that I'm not family anymore. That I have negative energy. To banish me from Christmas, from my grandchildren. And what did you do, Daniel? Nothing. You let it happen. You just stood by. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then Eleanor heard a soft, muffled sound. He was crying. Mom, he whispered, his voice broken. What do you want me to do? Eleanor didn't waver. What I want you to do, Daniel, is figure out how to pay your own mortgage. What I want you to do is explain the consequences of your wife's cruelty to her and to yourself. What I want you to do is decide if you're going to be a husband who sacrifices his mother for his wife's whims, or a son who finally stands up for the woman who gave him everything. Eleanor asserts that attacking her is attacking Daniel's mother. Excluding her is excluding the woman who raised Daniel, and telling her she's not family is telling Daniel his family doesn't matter. The silence after Daniel's call was different this time. It hummed with the electric anticipation of what was to come. Eleanor knew Chloe's fury would be spectacular once the full weight of the truth landed. If you've been following my story so far, I hope you're as invested as I am in seeing where this goes. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the next twists and turns. Exactly 20 minutes later, the phone shrieked. It was Chloe, and her voice, when Eleanor answered, was a guttural scream, a raw explosion of rage. "You vindictive, manipulative bitch." The words were a physical assault, vibrating through the receiver, making Eleanor flinch despite herself. Eleanor, however, remained remarkably composed. Her voice was steady, almost serenely calm. "Hello, Chloe? I take it Daniel told you about the mortgage situation." "You knew!" Chloe shrieked, the sound bordering on hysteria. "You knew all this time. You let us believe we could afford this house. You let us live a lie for 5 years. You were trying to control us, weren't you? Trying to buy your way into our lives." Her accusations tumbled out, a torrent of self-righteous fury. "Control you?" Eleanor queried, her tone mild, almost inquisitive. "Tell me, Chloe, what exactly did I control? What did I demand in return for this manipulation? What leverage did I hold over you and Daniel's heads?" Chloe paused, her breathing ragged, struggling to formulate a coherent answer through her rage. You wanted access to our family. Time with the grandchildren. You bought your way into our lives, making us dependent on you. "I was invited into your lives, Chloe," Eleanor corrected softly, yet with undeniable authority. "Daniel asked for my help, repeatedly. I simply answered the call. And as for access to our family, you yourself, just last week informed me I was not family anymore." An interesting turn of phrase, wouldn't you say? The words seemed to momentarily deflate Chloe's bluster, a fragile pinprick in her balloon of anger. "Well," Chloe huffed, her voice still sharp, but a fraction less hysterical, "I told you the truth about how we really feel." Eleanor seized the admission, her voice sharpening with purpose. "So, you meant what you said about me not being family, about me having negative energy, and you not wanting me here." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, a mirror held up to Chloe's own words. Chloe, though still seething, seemed to retreat from the absolute finality of her previous statements. "I meant that you were suffocating us, Eleanor. Always showing up, always inserting yourself into our business." "I see," Eleanor replied, her voice still calm, almost dangerously so. "Could you provide me with some specific examples, Chloe, of how I was suffocating you or inserting myself?" Chloe fumbled, clearly unprepared for a logical dissection of her emotional outburst. "Well, that time, you cut Lily's hair without asking," she finally blurted out, as if it were the ultimate transgression. Eleanor calmly recalled the incident. "Yes, I remember that. Lily had gotten chewing gum stuck in her hair, quite badly. You were unavailable, both you and Daniel. I called, I texted, I waited for 2 hours. It was either cut a small piece or shave her head. I chose the least traumatic option for a terrified 3-year-old. Chloe dismissed it with a wave of her hand, moving to another complaint. "And all those expensive art supplies you bought Sam. It completely undermined my parenting. We had already told him he couldn't have them. Sam had been asking for a proper set of art pencils and good paper for months." Eleanor countered, a faint sigh escaping her. "He showed a genuine talent. Chloe, it was a small gift, meant to encourage his passion. He loved them." Eleanor allowed a moment of silence to settle, letting Chloe's flimsy accusations hang in the air, exposed for their triviality. Then, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet force that transcended mere volume. "I will agree with you on one thing, Chloe. You are Lily and Sam's mother. You have every right to decide how to raise your children." She paused, letting that sink in before delivering her own decisive blow. "Just like I am Daniel's mother, and it seems you've forgotten what that means." "Attacking me, Chloe," Eleanor stated, her voice hardening with an undeniable authority, "is attacking Daniel's mother. Excluding me is excluding the woman who raised Daniel, who sacrificed for him, who taught him right from wrong. Telling me I'm not family is telling Daniel that his own family, the one he was born into, doesn't matter. You have made a decision, Chloe, and I have accepted it. Now, it seems, you and Daniel must accept the consequences." "You're twisting this!" Chloe shrieked, her voice still high-pitched but now laced with a desperate edge. "You're willing to make your own grandchildren homeless just because of your hurt feelings?" She tried to shift the blame, to paint Eleanor as the villain, driven by petty emotion. Eleanor remained calm, her voice a soothing balm over Chloe's frantic accusations, yet cutting through them with precision. "I'm not making anyone homeless, Chloe. I'm simply no longer paying your mortgage. There's a difference. You and Daniel chose to buy a house you couldn't afford on your own. I stepped in, at Daniel's request, to help. Now, I've stepped out." A strained silence followed. Then Chloe, her voice barely above a whisper, admitted the devastating truth. "We can't afford it, Eleanor. We can't afford the mortgage without you." The admission hung heavy in the air, a testament to years of financial pretense. "Then perhaps," Eleanor suggested, her tone practical, devoid of triumph, "you should consider moving somewhere you can afford. There are many lovely, smaller homes in perfectly good neighborhoods." Chloe's gasp was audible. "Move? Are you serious? We can't just move. Lily's preschool is here. Sam's friends are here. Our whole community is here. This is our life, the life we've built." She sounded genuinely incredulous, as if the suggestion were utterly outlandish. "A life I funded," Eleanor stated, her voice dry, pulling Chloe back to the uncomfortable reality. "But we didn't know," Chloe protested, clutching at straws. "We didn't know you were paying." "Daniel knew," Eleanor countered, the simple truth, a sharp jab. "He knew every month." Chloe's anger flared again, but this time it was laced with a different kind of fear. Public humiliation. "If this gets out," she hissed, "if people find out we're losing our house because Daniel's mother cut us off, do you know how that will look? Do you know what people will say?" "Oh?" Eleanor asked, her voice light, curious. "What do you imagine people will say?" "Chloe, they'll say you're a terrible person. They'll say you're selfish and vindictive," Chloe spat, projecting her own fears onto an imagined public. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a slow, methodical response forming in her mind. "Perhaps," she began, her voice calm and even. "They'll also remember how you subtly criticized my Thanksgiving stuffing, claiming yours was lighter and more modern. Or how you gently corrected me on Lily's dress choice for her birthday party, stating it wasn't on brand. Or the time you scoffed at Sam's art classes, insisting he should focus on more practical pursuits. Despite his passion," she continued, each memory, a quiet, devastating blow. "They might recall the times you made pointed comments about my dated furniture, or how you would suddenly become too busy when I offered to babysit after you'd previously relied on me. They might remember your constant need to one-up me, to assert your dominance, to remind everyone that you were in charge, that I was merely a peripheral figure in your grand life." Chloe was silent for a long moment, her breathing still ragged but losing its hysterical edge. "I was trying to. I needed space," she finally admitted, her voice small, a fragile crack in her defiance. "So," Eleanor concluded, allowing a touch of cold logic to enter her tone, "you pushed me away, criticized me, and made me feel unwelcome, all while happily taking my money and accepting my help. You wanted space. But you wanted my financial support more. You wanted to distance yourself from me, but you wanted me to hold your life together." Chloe sounded utterly exhausted. "What do you want from us, Eleanor?" she pleaded, the fight seemingly drained from her. "Do you want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings." The apology was hollow, delivered with the cadence of a coerced child, clearly lacking any genuine remorse. Eleanor dismissed it with a wave of her hand, though Chloe couldn't see the gesture. "Your apology, Chloe, means nothing to me. And this isn't about my hurt feelings. It's about choices and consequences." She knew Chloe would try to use the children again, and don't bother bringing up the children again. Children are resilient, adaptable. They will adjust. This isn't about them. Not in the way you think. Her voice hardened, gaining a new, uncompromising edge. This is about what happens when their father, Daniel, chooses between his wife and his mother over and over again. This is about what happens when you treat family, especially the person who has selflessly supported you for years, with disrespect and contempt. "The payment is due Friday," Chloe whispered, a last, desperate reminder of the ticking clock. "I know," Eleanor responded, her voice chillingly firm. "And I will not be making it." "Even knowing what it means for Lily and Sam?" Chloe gasped, clinging to the last shred of manipulation. "Especially knowing what it means for Lily and Sam," Eleanor clarified, her voice unwavering. "They need to see what happens when someone treats their grandmother badly. They need to understand that actions have consequences, that kindness is not a limitless resource, and that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt." Eleanor took a deep breath, the conversation finally reaching its inevitable conclusion. "I'm just no longer holding it together, Chloe. You wanted me out of your lives. Now I am." 3 days of quiet solitude passed, each hour solidifying Eleanor's resolve. The phone calls had ceased after Chloe's fiery outburst, a tense silence settling over the situation. Eleanor knew, deep down, that the quiet was merely the calm before the storm. The deadline for the mortgage payment loomed large, and with it, the inevitable confrontation. On Thursday evening, as twilight deepened outside her window, a soft knock rattled her front door. Eleanor opened it to find Daniel standing on her porch. He looked utterly disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his hair uncombed, and his face etched with a weariness that aged him by a decade. His eyes, usually bright, were sunken and haunted. He hadn't just tried to secure an emergency loan, he had failed. "Mom," he croaked, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" Eleanor stepped aside, and Daniel entered, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't sit, but stood awkwardly in her living room, twisting his hands. "I went to the bank, Mom. I tried to get a loan, anything. They said no. My credit, it's not good enough." He paused, taking a shuddering breath. "That's not even the worst of it." He looked at her then, a raw confession in his eyes. "Mom, you know how when we bought the house, 7 years ago, the mortgage was a struggle? I never actually qualified for it on my own. I convinced you to co-sign." Eleanor felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, though she kept her expression neutral. She remembered that day, the hurried paperwork, Daniel's assurances that it was just a formality, that his consulting business was about to take off. A fact, she now realized, he had conveniently forgotten to mention to Chloe. "I've been living a lie for 7 years, Mom," Daniel confessed, his voice breaking. 7 years of pretending we were financially secure, that I was providing everything, and all of it funded by my mother's retirement savings." He finally sat, collapsing onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. Eleanor remained standing, her gaze steady. He let out a bitter laugh. "I didn't truly believe it would ever generate enough income to cover it all. I just hoped. And I knew, deep down, that you would keep paying. You always did." Eleanor nodded. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "For as long as I could." Daniel looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I let you carry the burden, Mom, to protect Chloe from embarrassment, from seeing my perceived financial failure, to maintain the illusion of control she craves." He swallowed hard. "I've been choosing wrong, Mom. Consistently. Letting Chloe treat you badly. making excuses for her, all to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I thought I was protecting my marriage, but I wasn't. I was protecting myself from having to choose, from having to stand up, from having to be a man. Eleanor watched him, a glimmer of hope stirring within her. This was not the Daniel who had stood by silently. This was a man confronting his own cowardice, his own complicity. I have a plan, Daniel said, his voice firmer now, infused with a newfound resolve, however painful. It's going to be ugly, but I have to do it. He looked her directly in the eye. I'm going to tell Chloe everything. The co-signing, the payments, every single month for 7 years. I'm going to demand a genuine apology for how she's treated you, for the years of disrespect. He took a shaky breath. And if she refuses, if she won't acknowledge her behavior, if she refuses to take responsibility, then I'll know what's more important to her, being right or being married. He closed his eyes, a grim acceptance on his face. We'll lose the house, Mom. I know that. The children, they'll have to adjust to a new life. Children are resilient, Daniel, Eleanor reminded him, her voice soft but clear. What they won't adjust to is growing up in a home built on lies and funded by guilt. They won't adjust to seeing their father diminished and their grandmother mistreated, all under a veneer of false happiness. I'm so sorry, Mom, Daniel whispered, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. I'm so sorry I wasn't the son who stands up for his mother. You can start now, Daniel, Eleanor told him, her voice firm, yet gentle. It's not too late to be that son. He looked at her, hope warring with despair in his eyes. Is it too late? Have I lost you? You haven't lost me, Daniel, Eleanor reassured him, stepping closer and placing a hand on his shoulder. But I won't go back to the way things were. The dynamic has to change. She looked him directly in the eye. Chloe needs to show basic respect. You need to stop expecting me to solve your financial problems. And both of you need to acknowledge me as a person, not just a bank account or a convenient babysitter. Daniel nodded, the tears flowing freely now, cleansing years of unspoken guilt. I understand, Mom. I truly do. He looked up at her, his voice choked with genuine emotion. I am so sorry, Mom, for taking your money, for taking your time, for taking your love, and giving you nothing but stress in return. I'm so sorry for letting you down. It was a heartfelt apology, one that Eleanor had waited years to hear. He rose then, squaring his shoulders, a new strength emanating from him even through his sorrow. Mom, please. Just one more payment. Just this once. To buy us some time, to sell the house properly, to find a new place. Eleanor met his gaze, her own unwavering. No, Daniel, she said, her voice firm, the finality absolute. I'm done enabling this situation. The payment isn't my responsibility anymore. Daniel finally left that evening, not with anger, but with a bowed head and a glimmer of newfound understanding in his eyes. He had finally grasped Eleanor's unwavering stance. She would not, could not, continue to participate in her own mistreatment. The silence that followed his departure was no longer tense, but held a fragile promise of change. 3 weeks later, the quiet of Eleanor's home was joyously shattered. Her front door burst open, and Lily, a whirlwind of pink and giggles, launched herself into Eleanor's waiting arms, followed closely by a slightly more reserved but equally excited Sam. Grandma, we missed you, Lily squealed, burying her face in Eleanor's shoulder. Sam hugged her tightly, murmuring, Me too, Grandma. Eleanor embraced them both, a warmth spreading through her chest that momentarily overshadowed all the recent pain. Oh, my sweethearts. I missed you too. So much. She welcomed them in, and they immediately began to explore her living room, noticing details they'd previously overlooked, commenting on the intricate patterns of her rug, the soft texture of her armchair. They were just children, delighted by the familiar yet somehow new surroundings. Daniel, looking far less disheveled than his last visit, entered behind them. He sat down, a tired but resolute look on his face. "We're moving, Mom," he began. Without preamble. "Found a small rental, perfectly affordable. It's not the house on Maple Street, but it's clean, safe, and ours." He gave a wry smile. "Actually ours. This time." He paused, watching the children play. "They're adjusting remarkably well, actually. Better than Chloe, certainly." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, expecting an update on her daughter-in-law. "Chloe's still angry," Daniel confirmed, his voice devoid of his usual defensiveness. "Blames you for everything. Tells anyone who'll listen that you abandoned your own grandchildren out of spite and destroyed her life." He shrugged, a gesture of weary acceptance. "She's deflecting. Mom, she doesn't do wrong very well." Then, from his pocket, Daniel pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for you," he said, his voice soft, sincere. He read from it, his eyes meeting hers. "Mom, I was a coward. I let Chloe treat you badly. I let you give me money, time, and your love. And I gave you nothing but stress and disrespect in return. It will never happen again." He refolded the paper, placing it carefully on the coffee table. "We're in counseling," Daniel continued, running a hand through his hair. "Chloe, she's struggling. She still thinks you overreacted. She still believes she was justified in her words." He sighed. A heavy sound. "I keep telling her, Chloe, families don't tell each other they're not family anymore. I tell her if she can't understand that, if she can't take responsibility for how she speaks to people, especially my mother, then what kind of foundation do we even have for a marriage?" His gaze was direct, earnest. "She might choose to end the marriage, Mom. I know that. But I also know that if she does, me and the kids will be okay. I'm not afraid of losing Chloe anymore. I'm more afraid of losing you." Eleanor reached across and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not going to lose me, Daniel. But as I said, I won't go back to the way things were." "I don't want to go back either, Mom," Daniel asserted, his grip firm. "I want better for all of us. I pledge to be the father my children deserve, and the son you raised. A son who stands up for what's right." He looked at her, his resolve clear. "If Chloe doesn't apologize, if she can't understand the fundamental disrespect of her words and actions, then I'll learn what it means to put my children's well-being ahead of my own comfort, even if it means walking away." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "We can just start from here. With full knowledge and understanding of our past and a clear vision for our future." She laid out what this new beginning meant. "You, Daniel, will bring to this family a man who understands the difference between peace and enabling abuse, a father who prioritizes character and integrity, a son who truly treats his mother like family, and, for herself," she added. "And I will bring a woman who knows her worth, a grandmother who loves fiercely but without sacrificing her dignity, and a mother who is finally done enabling." From the den, Lily's innocent voice drifted into the living room. "Grandma!" The princess saved herself. Eleanor and Daniel exchanged a look, a shared, knowing smile. Lily, in her simple wisdom, had perhaps summed it up best. 2 months later, the colonial house on Maple Street was sold. Daniel had filed for divorce. Chloe, unwilling to continue counseling or accept any responsibility for her actions, had chosen to move away with the children, taking them to live with her sister, several states away. It was a painful separation for Daniel, but he had stood firm. He found a new, better-paying job that allowed him to visit Lily and Sam regularly, making the long drives every other weekend. Lily and Sam now visited Eleanor often, sometimes even for sleepovers. One afternoon, while they were baking cookies, Lily looked up at Eleanor, her small face thoughtful. "Grandma," she asked, "what makes a family?" Eleanor paused, considering the question deeply. "Well, sweet pea," she began. "What do you think makes a family?" Lily pondered for a moment, then beamed. "People who love you even when you're sad, and people who don't say mean things, and people who share cookies." Eleanor's heart swelled. "You know what?" "Lilybug?" she said, hugging her granddaughter tightly. Later that evening, a text message arrived from Daniel. "Thank you for not giving up on us, Mom. For not giving up on me." Eleanor smiled, a peaceful, contented smile. She typed her reply. "Family doesn't give up. It just sets better boundaries." As Eleanor finally went to sleep that night, the house quiet once more, she felt a profound sense of genuine happiness. She had learned the essential, painful difference between loving someone and enabling their destructive behavior, and she had discovered the empowering, life-affirming act of simply refusing to participate in her own mistreatment. She was finally free.